Hear him out.
Hi, I'm Nina.
And I'm Jeff.
Welcome to Hear 'em Out. Let's give a big welcome to Louie Julian.
Woo, welcome to the show, Louie.
Hello. I think this is where the clap track would have been appropriate, right?
Yeah, the clap
Oh
track.
my
You just
God.
enter the clap track. Perfect.
I was supposed to do that. Sorry about. Well, there we go. Here's the clap track. See? Well, there we go. A little delayed,
Perfect.
but yeah.
Okay, first things first. We just want to know, what have you been up to in quarantine?
Man, I wish I could say I was doing like the Chloe Ting exercises or baking stuff. No, but no, really. Because I'm a teacher, I mean, we've been focusing on online teaching for the last few months, okay? I mean, just adjusting to it and going through all this training and trying to figure out all the technology that we could use and really just changing even the principles behind how we teach and how we deliver our content. So it's been pretty much that. I mean, in fact, I've been losing sleep ever since the semester began in Ateneo a couple of weeks ago. Like on average, I've been sleeping at around 3 in the morning because it's either I'm doing content during the day, like recording lectures or putting stuff in the modules that I have to put, the online modules,
Mhm.
or I'm checking papers, right? Or I'm responding to discussion comments and things like that. I know people have been saying take care of yourself and I totally agree with that. I mean, I am really all for self-care, and I swear I've been trying to find time to do it like I wish I could.
Yeah.
But to be honest, it's been really hard. But I guess the only thing that I've been or whatever my source of hope here is that because it's a transition period, I mean it's really going to be volatile.
Yeah.
So once that subsides and once I start to find my footing, my rhythm, I think then I can go back to a more regular schedule. So yeah, it's been mostly online teaching from here.
Right, and because primarily during the quarantine you've been teaching, and you mentioned you've been sleeping at 3 a.m. and wow,
Yeah, man.
how has that experience been like? No, that shift from being in the classroom, because from what I know, from what I hear, you're very much close to your students. You like to engage physically with your
Yeah,
students,
yeah.
and how has that transition been sort of like for you?
When you say engage physically, I mean it's not like I wrestle them or something. I mean I just want to make that clear, okay?
Of course, of
But
course.
I mean, yeah,
Physical
right, of
contact,
course, right?
physical contact, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just want to clarify, but I mean, I agree with you that yes, I do love the face-to-face interactions. I thrive on the post-class conversations. And Av knows this, right? That when it comes to to teaching, when it comes to lecturing, I really love the whole experience of the classroom because everything's in real time. You get to see the reactions, you get to listen to their questions right then and there, and it really just feels like a very I'd say it's a very visceral experience. To be in a classroom, and now it's a lot harder because I mean you have to deal with things like internet connectivity. You have to deal with things like being considerate that the students' internet connection isn't bad, so that if let's say that they can't make it to a synchronous session, I mean you can't fault them for it, and I understand why. I mean definitely we have to err on the side of compassion these days, but without that structure, without the structure, the discipline that comes with the classroom, and but more importantly without the interactions, I think it's just made the job a lot harder. So if I were to put it all that I've said in a nutshell, the thing about online teaching is that it requires 10 times more work, but
Yeah.
it's 10 times less fulfilling, I must
Oh
say.
my gosh, I agree. I
Oh,
100% agree with that.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, but we gotta do it. Definitely, we
yeah.
have to do it. I mean, we have to push through, and we gotta keep the education going. So that's why we're here. Yeah.
right. And one thing I noticed then with online classes is that I understand when you say it's 10 times more difficult because parang the line between you being a teacher and not being a teacher in and out of the classroom, it's sort of blurred because
Mm-hmm.
anytime they can just ask you a question online, and you're always just there, and it's kind of hard to set that boundary when you're in the classroom and when you're not in the classroom, because that line sort of just blurs altogether.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's why it's so funny that my colleagues, we keep reminding ourselves to always set a boundary. That after 5 p.m., make sure that you don't respond to student emails anymore, because
Mm-mm.
you at the same time, while you have to take care of yourself, you also have to teach your students how to respect office hours and things like that. But I don't know. It's just I still find it so difficult. I still find it so tempting to have to reply right then
Mm-hmm.
and there.
Right.
Right? So I mean that's still something that I'm kind of working on,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest with you, because I mean I understand the need for boundaries, that's for sure. I mean not just the professional boundaries, but even the self-care boundaries. But there's a part of me that also questions the boundaries, diba?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Not to say that they're unimportant, but if I have a choice between being there for a student when a student needs me, or upholding the boundary, I tend to err on the side of being there for the student.
Right.
Right? I mean, corny as it sounds, but and I don't know if this is just the foolishness of youth, but that's really just my thing when it comes to teaching. Yeah.
It's a very personal approach,
Oh
I
yeah,
would
for
say.
sure, man, for sure.
And on the subject of teaching and being a professor, I just want to congratulate you for becoming tenured as a faculty member
Thank you,
Yes.
just a
man.
few months ago, right?
Thank you. Yeah, a few months ago.
Yeah, and would you say this is like a dream come true for you? Did you always see yourself as being part of the academe?
No, to be honest with you, I didn't. So I teach theology, right?
Right.
Mhm.
And I think religion, okay, my faith and all that. I mean, it's been a constant part of my life ever since I was young.
Yeah.
And typically, as what would a 9-year-old extremely active church boy want to be? Maybe a priest. So in college, I mean, I really did think of the priesthood seriously. I really thought, and even my classmates thought that that was where I was going. Like even during grade school, high school reunions, they'd still call me father. What the heck, right? I mean, and I'd always joke, parang wala pa akong anak. A father ko siya. Or something like, paano mo nalaman? Or I'd say something like that. But no, I mean, I never thought I'd be a teacher, really. I mean, I thought I'd be a priest, which is somewhat close to it. And
Right.
then college happens, and then I didn't know what to do with my life. And it was only really somewhere there. Well, in college, who knows what they're going to do in their life anyway, right?
True.
But
Yeah.
it was only really in the latter part of college that it became a lot clearer to me that I wanted to do something that involved, number one, helping people, and yet number two, helping people in the way that I realized I was good at, just talking to people, right? So I mean, in the latter part of college, I mean, I joined all of these orgs that trained me to sort of facilitate groups. Okay, in Ateneo we have what we call the talks and tours at TNT. So during the orientation seminar or SEM for freshies, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we're the ones who are assigned to a block and we introduce Ateneo to them basically, and then get them to bond, lead them in group dynamics. And I thought, man, this is something that I really, really want to do. But at the time, definitely, I didn't imagine that it was teaching. I just thought that I wanted to help people by talking or kind of helping them see their lives differently. It was only a lot later that I realized that that was teaching.
It's amazing though how since since high school and grade school and then college, it just you didn't realize you were on this path to being an educator. But like was there a specific experience that you had that you just suddenly had an epiphany like, okay, I'm gonna be an educator?
No, because that's the thing, Nina. Epiphanies are rare. They barely happen. Like one of the hardest things that you could ever ask a person is, it's like a teacher. So why did you decide to teach? Or if you ask somebody why they're in love with their significant other, diba, probably you'll ask, bakit mo siya mahal? Why do you love this person? It's very hard for any person in that position to give like a single tweetable answer,
Mhm.
because there's
Mhm.
there's like an entire slew of reasons that would lead you to where you are right now. So I don't think there was ever really an epiphany moment, but there were just many small moments that helped me realize that this is what I wanted to do. So of course, other than the facilitation experiences I had in college, I mean, I had really, really great teachers in college too, who I also wanted to emulate because there was just something about the classroom experience with them that, corny as it sounds, I find so magical, so gripping, right? I mean, like, just whenever they would talk about something so passionately, and it's an 80-minute class and you don't feel that it's 80 minutes, and you're just, because you're so gripped by their stories, you're so gripped by how they explain to you how the world works. And I thought to
Mhm.
myself, damn, that's exactly what I want to be, right? So,
Yeah.
but you see, yun nga, I mean, it's all of that really coming together, wanting to emulate my teachers, wanted to practice my skills. And then if you ask me why I stayed, then we'll probably need like 3 more podcast episodes for that, right? Right. So yeah, I mean, I hope I'm not. This doesn't come off as wishy washy or anything, but I mean, you get what I mean, right? I mean, when
Yeah,
you're
I get it.
experiencing something so profound, it's just so hard to come up with just a singular reason or two.
I want to ask you not why you stayed, but how has the journey been for you so far? From
Hmm.
when you began teaching as an instructor, now that you're a Ateneo professor, how was that journey for you personally?
It's been mostly joyful, that's for sure. Like all told, if I were to have a bird's eye view of the whole 6 years so far. And see, 6 years, not even that long. I mean, it's been mostly joyful. Okay, but I'm not saying that because it's joyful that it wasn't difficult. It wasn't.
Hmm.
There weren't any rough patches that I had to handle. I mean, there were that didn't mean that there weren't any difficult people in that story. There were, for sure. I mean, I have students who were memorable for their, well, them making it very clear that they didn't like me,
Oh,
right? Or yeah, or they didn't really like the subject and all that. But thankfully, they ended up becoming like very, very, very few. Like if I were to make a guess, like how many they are at, in the last 6 years, I'd probably say they're around 15 now. But see, 15 over 1,308, that's a pretty bad. That's a pretty good number,
Yeah.
right?
yes.
So, diba? I mean, what's 15 people out of like the hundreds of other students who said that they had a good experience learning with me? But you so see, all told, it's been both good and bad, but mostly good. It's been both fulfilling and challenging, but mostly fulfilling. That's what I'd say about that. Hi to all the 15 people there, by the
That
way.
1% of students who didn't
Yeah.
enjoy.
I'll see you in purgatory if I'm there. No, no, no.
Oh
Can I
my
just insert this really quick thing? I always share this whenever I have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know that Catholics have this belief in purgatory, right? And purgatory simply
God.
means that you're not, after you die, and you're not in a state in which you're completely ready for heaven yet, because there are certain baggages or unresolved things on earth that you haven't quite resolved yet, and you need to purge that. That's why purgatory, to purge, to
Yeah.
clean, right?
Yes.
Before you then become in union with God in heaven.
Mhm.
And I mean, of course, there is nobody knows what's in purgatory, right? Although there are many images of it. And I tell myself that my image of purgatory is this. It's that I'm in the worst classroom in Ateneo, like unair conditioned, extremely hot, okay? And then it's it's at a really ungodly hour to do class. Let's say it's like 2 p.m.
Oh,
Okay.
right after lunch. Okay.
Yeah, okay. I mean, and I'm teaching a class, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And the students that are in that class are all of the students throughout my life who really didn't like me.
So it's the 15.
Yeah, it's those 15 people and probably more when the when my career extends, right?
Yeah.
And then the only way that I can get out of that classroom and go to heaven is when I could sincerely say that that was the best class I ever taught.
Oh, oh my God.
Does that make
Oh.
Well,
sense?
good luck.
No, really, but does that make sense? For me, that's a very accurate, I think, theological sound image of what purgatory is, right? When I'm able to release my baggages and not care whether or not they like me, but because I enjoy teaching so much, because this is what God told me to do, whether or not my students like me. And if I fully accept that, no matter who I teach them, there we go. I've done my job.
That's an amazing image of purgatory. Like,
I know, man. It's crazy.
my image of purgatory is just a room, an empty
An
room,
Yeah,
empty
like
room. My image is an empty blank room.
yeah, empty blank room with like nothing. Everyone is just sad and no one's allowed to talk to each other. That's literally it.
no, there are other images pa nga eh. I mean, there's this other image where it was shared to me by another colleague of mine where you're in an empty room, but the only person who's there is your mortal enemy. Like somebody you have such a difficult time forgiving. And the only way that you can get out of there is if you give that person a hug and that you really mean it.
Oh.
Yeah, di ba?
Oh
But,
my
di ba?
god.
And we should have a whole episode on just purgatory. Like, what's your image of purgatory?
Well, you get very interesting answers.
Okay.
Or I'll probably steal the show now and ask that, right? So, Jeff, what's your image of? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Since we're on the subject of purgatory and going into these sort of topics.
I'm totally ruining the plan of the episode now. I'm so sorry.
No, 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 no. It's
No,
fine.
it's
It's
so
fine.
fun.
It's
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 fun to
fine.
listen to.
All right.
I actually just want to clarify for people who aren't familiar, because you teach theology, right?
Sure.
And for us people in like Nina and I, we come from UP. We don't have this subject called
Yeah.
theology.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, we don't in UP.
Yeah, oblations are gone.
Yeah, how is that different? How is that different from say philosophy of religion?
Right.
Are they the same thing? Parang, what is the difference?
No, not really, because I think theology, especially Christian theology, you study it from the point of view of faith, of somebody who believes. Okay.
Okay.
Of course, some would argue that you could study theology and be an atheist and be a non believer. That's true. But then I think you're going to miss out on a lot of things. Okay. I mean, if you are an atheist and you do theology, if you're looking at it from an outsider's perspective, there are so many things that you won't be able to get. So it's like, for example, if I study BTS, okay,
Okay.
and I'm truth be told, I'm not a fan. I mean, I've heard their music and I find it cool, but I mean, it's not as if they're blowing my musical mind,
Oh
right?
no, people are going to get angry, but carry
Yeah.
on.
No, okay. No, but really, for those of you listening to this episode, I think they're great. It's just that as a matter of personal preference, I don't consider them a favorite group. It's not
Yeah.
because they're bad,
Mhm.
right? But it's just not tickling my fancy, as it were,
Yeah.
right? So going back to that analogy real quick, right? If I study BTS as somebody who's not a fan, I mean, there are things that I could pick up from it, sure, but maybe I won't be able to appreciate the whole experience precisely because I'm not a fan, not a
Mhm.
huge fan. Okay. But philosophy of religion, I think, comes from a more disinterested point of view, meaning to say you can study religions, you can study why people have these certain belief systems, and you can do that absolutely fine, absolutely perfect without having to believe in any of these systems. I think that's one of the main differences.
Mhm.
Right. So pardon me,
Yeah.
BTS people. Again, they're cool. Okay. Just that yun nga, I mean, but there's no arguing preferences, right?
Yeah.
There. I hope I answered your question though, Jeff.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was just curious because it's not something that we normally talk about. I
Yeah.
mean, especially from where we come from in UP, and
Yeah.
it's just something I wanted to clarify. 'Cause,
Yeah, and sorry, but I just want to clarify as well. And again, I say this whenever I could that
yeah.
I always make a point in my class to be really really sensitive to people who don't believe in God and
Mhm.
Mhm.
people who are struggling to believe in God, right? I mean, I never make my students feel that if you have troubles believing in God, that you're gonna have a hard time here, and you're probably going to hell because you have no moral compass. I mean, no, I mean, I would never ever say that. I'd never ever say that. In fact, the more that you're struggling, the more that I will accompany you through that and help and listen to your questions and talk to you, and not to convince you, not to try to convert you, but really just to get into a conversation with you and say that, you know, I understand it's difficult and I want to listen to you. So sorry about that. I really just want to make that very clear as well.
No, but like I really appreciate that you said that because I went to a Catholic high school, grade school, high school. It was Catholic, and I remember I would ask a lot of questions because we had a Christian living education as a class, and I would have a lot of questions, and there were there were times my teacher would get mad at me for asking such questions, and
Mhm.
like I think that it was very difficult to learn. I know
Mhm.
it's very different from theology, but I think it was very difficult also to believe. especially when the teachers of like Christian living education mismo are kind of not acknowledging your questions. So like I just want to say, even if you were never my professor, thank you for actually doing that to your students.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting that you say that, Nina, because I would often say that at the beginning of my classes, almost like a caricature. Like I'd say, oh, maybe you had a CLE class in high school that made you not entertain questions or made you feel that if you doubt God, you're a sinner. I mean, I often said that with some sort of comedic effect, right? Or it's more of like, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, man, this can't possibly be true, what I'm saying. I'm really just provoking them, but I don't know. Year in and year out, students just keep telling me, Louis, what you've been saying is actually true. That's why doing theology and actually welcoming questions and trying to figure out who this God is and what this faith is all about and entertaining these doubts, this feels like a very new experience for us. Because I tell them that theology is precisely about questioning. So yun nga, whenever I hear stories like yours, I'm constantly amazed that it seems like what I thought was a caricature is actually not as caricatured as I thought.
I think as a young people generally approach things that are unfamiliar or new, their initial encounters or their first impressions, they really have a lasting effect on how they approach any subject matter, be it in theology or in science or in math or what
Sure.
have you.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's really their first encounter. So like with Nina's story, like when her teacher was very uptight with answering the questions, I mean, other people could have that same experience of approaching maybe religion in general. They'd
Yeah,
be apprehensive to that whole experience of entertaining the fact that there is God, things like that.
that's right. Because I mean, as you grow up, religion is pretty much a given, right? I mean, especially if you were born in a Catholic context and you went to mass and you learned all of these things like Bible stories and sacraments and whatnot, and you'd participate in them. But then, as you get older, naturally you're going to think, I mean, what's this all about? I mean, how is this still all relevant to me anyway? And that's why theology is there at that particular point in college. Diba? So you can catch those questions, right?
Looking at these questions and answering the questions that asking the big questions actually that matter, that
Hmm.
make us figure out who we are, being self-aware, being finding out who we are as individuals, because I think that's a constant struggle with young people these days. Now we have this obsession to find out who we are and who we want to be, and maybe you could give us some insight into that, Louis.
Hmm. Well, I'm gonna come from my experience as somebody who teaches college students and somebody who isn't too far from that, because I mean I only graduated from college 6 years ago, right? And for me, it feels well, 6 years ago, 6 to 7 years ago. So see, I mean, I really just spent 1 year working elsewhere, and then I came back to college as a prof. It's crazy, right? So, I mean, some of the people who were students when I came in, I mean, I still met them, and they were when I was a student, and they were students. I mean, we were both students.
Right.
So, one thing I realized is the reason why it's so hard to stay true to ourselves is because we don't even know who we are. I mean, college is really a time of discovery. And it's really not just college, but even the years after that, diba? The late adolescence, the young adulthood. And most especially that, because like where I am now, like your mid 20s, okay, you're out of college, you're kind of thrown into the world without the usual formative structure that you've been accustomed to for many years. Like teachers telling you that this is how you have to act and this is how you have to think. No, now you're gonna have to figure out the world on your own,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? And so because you don't have that comfortable footing, then all of a sudden you're going to start trying to look for your orient, your foundations. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's that. So I mean, that's my quick answer to that. So why is it so hard for us to find ourselves? It's because we don't really know who we are, and we've lost our footing, or we're at a stage, young people, even adolescents, either early or late. We're at a stage where we're really just trying to figure things out.
Yeah, I actually like really agree with the finding yourself. I think because you hear so many things from other people, from family, and do you think it plays a huge part, if ever, in like everyone, for everyone, and including you?
For sure, for sure. Let's put it this way, and Av told me to share some things that I've been sharing my to my students in class, because other than teaching theology, like basic theology, right now I teach freshies. I also teach a class for college seniors. I mean, those who are about to graduate, and it's a class about discerning life's questions, right? And one of the first things that we talk about is trying to figure out who we are. You know, and engaging the question, "Who am I?" All right. I
Mhm.
often share with them that there are three ways that people tend to define who they are. Okay, and this comes from one of my favorite authors and spiritual writers, Henry Nouwen. He says that we tend to define ourselves according to what we do, number one. Number two, who people say we are. And number three, what we own. Put that into three R's, about your roles,
Mhm.
your reputation, and your riches. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, the reason why we tend to define ourselves according to those three R's is because those are things that are measurable. Those are
Right.
things that you can see, they're tangible. That's why even it's very telling, right? That we even have a concept of self worth. Think about that,
Uh-huh.
self worth.
Yeah.
Why do we talk about ourselves in terms in economic terms,
Right.
right? As
Yeah.
if, how, what am I worth? What's my price? If you could put a number on, because that's our tendency. We measure the worth of something. Okay. Now going to your point about what other people say you are. I mean, that's the second R, right? Your reputation.
Yeah.
And we tend to follow that because number one, we really care about the people who tell us about who we are and what we should do. I mean, because they're family members, they're friends and all that. Okay, but
Mhm.
even something larger like society, right? They dictate upon you in some unconscious way na parang that this is what you need to do, maybe based on what media says or maybe what your Instagram account says. This is what you need to do, or this is the image of a successful person. Okay? So why do we tend to define ourselves according to that? Because that's exactly what we can see. But the dangerous part is everyone has a different opinion about you and what you should be. So what's gonna happen?
Mhm. Yeah.
If you try to follow that one person's opinion and then you try to follow that other's opinion that contradicts it, you're gonna end up becoming stretched. I mean, you're going to go all over the place. And the
Right.
image that I normally give in class is imagine yourself in a drum circle, okay, and you're in the middle and you're trying to dance, right? You're trying to follow a beat,
Mhm.
okay.
Mhm.
But then if people are playing many different beats, then you're gonna be overwhelmed because you don't know what to follow. You don't know how you don't know how you're going to dance.
Yeah.
And I think that image presents how, I mean, I'd say the tragedy when we tend to define ourselves only according to what people say we are or our reputation. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, because that's actually a really good analogy because it happens in real life. I mean, like, for example, I'm sure it happens a lot though. Like, there's a team, and then, so of course, teams have like a head coach and then multiple assistant coaches. And then sometimes, for some reason, like assistant coaches would tell a certain player to do the opposite thing what the head coach is telling them to do. So I think that goes the same with like listening to other people's opinions nga of you. Like as you said, it's like you don't know what to follow anymore. You don't know what to do.
Right.
So I feel like the only way, if ever, to you just have to be so sure of yourself. But
Mhm.
I just want to ask, like, why is validation so important to us? And I mean, like, how do we like reclaim that validation, but like for ourselves lang, and not in the context of like what other people think?
Yeah, and before that, I want to fortify the question of Nina, and parang I think what Nina's trying to say is how can we reconcile that having we want one thing, but we also have to take into account our reputation, what other people think, and what the other people say. How do we reconcile these two voices? I guess.
Yeah, exactly. To answer Nina's question first, why is validation so important? Because validation is so concrete. Diba? It's something
Mhm.
that you can see, right? It's something that you can hear, right? Versus
Mhm.
something like what I really want or the desire of my soul. I mean, what's that, right? I mean, of course, it's like a tiny little voice in your head, if you're a tiny little voice in your heart, something like that, right? But then that's going to be obscured because you don't hear that as clearly as you hear the validation of other people, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Going back to what I was saying earlier, when we define ourselves according to our role, our reputation, and our riches, we then become somewhat less sensitive to who we truly are and what we really want. Okay. Now, how do you pay attention to what you really want? You don't shift to the opposite extreme. Because what some other people do is diba, they'd say something like, "Oh, eto na, we'll sulitin natin yung yung explicit." Diba, some people would say, "Fuck the world," right?
Mm.
I mean, I don't care
Yeah.
what other people say, right? I mean, I'm gonna do things my way, okay? And that might sound very cool and empowering at first, but then, at the same time, you cannot avoid the wisdom of other people. You cannot avoid
Yeah.
the needs of the world, right? I mean, you cannot avoid the fact that there are certain roles that you have to fill. So that's why I think it's important to have a good sense of balance in your life. Okay, like trying to look at the voices in your life more as advisors rather than dictators. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
It's like I listen to the opinion of my family and my friends, and I have to take these into account because what they're telling me is probably some data that's very, very important in the decision making process that I have to do. But in the end, who makes the decision? Me, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
I've made that decision not in a bubble, but it's an informed decision having balanced all of the many different voices that are in my life. That's what in my class, that's what we call discernment,
Mhm.
right? I mean, to discern properly, to pay attention which of these voices really make sense, which of them are really value adding, which contribute to a good decision, and which of these voices are just my fears or my attachments. Okay. But see, you can only really do that, okay, if you see these voices more as advisors rather than dictators.
Yeah.
Damn, no?
That's actually
Yeah.
that's yeah. Like it's making me like rethink my whole life and how I approach everything and what everyone said.
Actually, why don't you deal with that for a moment? So, can you tell me a bit? Nah, I'm just kidding.
It's just making me like go into like
We'll go into another episode.
I no, because sometimes when my students go to me for these one-on-one conversations or counseling, but it sometimes leads to that. So tell me about yourself, right? I mean, where's this question coming from? No, I'm not just saying that
oh
to
my
be
god.
to be like cute or anything like that, but it's a really important question to ask because I think I've learned throughout the years that you don't just pay attention to the question, but you also have to pay attention to where the question comes from.
Yeah,
Right.
Where's the
exactly.
context? Because once you understand the context, then you'll also know how to respond to it a lot better.
And that's what I've heard. Like I've worked in media for a bit, and that is actually what I've heard. Na parang you should be able to discern properly. Na am I listening to the right person for constructive criticism
Right.
and for this kind of feedback? Because not all feedback will be like some feedback will be to my detriment, and I just have to be careful of that. So
Yeah, some voices are just there to tear you apart,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
They're not there to give you life. They're not there to guide you towards something better. So see, that's why you really have to pay attention. Which of these voices are trying to tear me apart and which of these voices are trying to build me up, right?
Right.
But
yeah.
to figure that out, of course, you'd have to go beyond what you feel about those voices because there are some people you might not like what they say at first, but when you think about it in retrospect, they were actually trying to build you up. And then there are some people who will be very two-faced with you and say that you're doing a good job, and then they're actually tearing you down because they're saying,
Mhm.
they're talking shit behind your back.
Right.
And that happens in real life.
Yes, it
Mhm.
tends to happen a lot.
That's what I was told.
But I guess no, at the end of the day, given all of these things, all of the like what you said, we take all of these things that we hear as advisors and not dictators. At the end of the day, we as individuals have the capacity to decide. We have to choose which ones we take in for ourselves, which of the ones that we choose to throw out and leave behind. The power of our own agency, I guess.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I guess that depends on what the foundation of your self understanding is. I mean, for me, being a theist, being somebody who believes in God, I say that the voice that I truly want to listen to is the voice of God in my life. And I'm not talking about the Morgan Freeman kind of thing, right? But I mean, diba? I mean, I'm talking about like the voice that calls me to greater life. Diba? The voice that calls me to love more, the voice that calls me to serve more, the voice that tells me that I shouldn't be half-assing my work, right? Because in giving myself, my entire self to something meaningful, I mean, that's how I do God's will in my life. But I mean, for those who don't believe in God, I mean, it could be something like, I just want to be the best version of myself, right? I want to make sure that with the limited time I have here on this earth, that I live a life of some significance, right?
Right.
So, in other words, it's really just making your life meaningful and living your life according to the meaning that you have set your faith onto.
Right.
Wow, that was a long pause.
Yeah. Just
Were
a
you
moment to
thinking
take it
that?
all in.
I'm just feeling a lot of things. Like I have so many thoughts right now. Like I'm thinking so deeply.
Probably, why is this guy talking a lot? He's probably our chattiest guest. I mean, that's one of the thoughts. I'm so sorry.
No, but it's odd. It's just really so profound. Like everything that you're saying, it's like I can relate to. Theology is just a very. I feel like it just makes you such a wise person.
And Nina, I just want to say, I mean, thank you. I'm flattered, but I also want to make it clear that these are things that I've figured out through a lot of pain, a lot of mistakes. No, 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 to be honest with you, and to be honest, I'm still learning a lot. You know, when I was listening to the other guests that you had, I mean, particularly Father Johnny Gore, right? I mean, the reason why I found Johnny Gore so profound in what he was saying is because he was somebody who went through so much already. I mean, he's a person of experience. He's a person who's moved from JESCOM and then went to Savior School and went traveled abroad and probably dealt with all sorts of people, right? And given his stature, and he, I mean, he's still trying to figure out a lot of things in this life, and most especially me, who's still like in my mid to late 20s, right? I mean, I'm blessed to be able to understand things about the world, but I honestly want to say, and this is not just me covering my ass, right? But I honestly do feel that there's still so much more I have to learn. I mean, there's still so much more to this world, and it's so much more complex, and that's why I'm teaching theology and I'm figuring out my life, because that's just how great the mystery of all of this is. Corny as it sounds, but but
Right.
no, really, I say that because I always have to be humble before the truth, and I don't have a full grasp of the truth.
Yeah, those are some of the things we all struggle with, I guess.
Yeah. So see, I mean, thank you if you like what I say, and I really do believe in them. But I'm not just saying them for Twitter likes. It's really because that's how my. And I'm not saying that you're thinking that way. No, I'm not. But I really just want to make it clear that this quote unquote wisdom are things that I live by. And when I say I live by them, and these are things that are dynamic, I'm figuring them out. I can talk about them, but I don't know them fully.
And I guess what hit me from what you said, no, on the subject of, going through different things, even painful experiences. No, I think what I'd like to just bring up is sometimes those painful experiences, no, they don't always make our identities, no, but
Oh yeah.
maybe we can find ourselves in those painful experiences, I guess. No, because when you go through something difficult, when you go through something challenging, it's often there where you see what you want to do, things that you want to fulfill for yourself, or the path that you want to go, the path that you want to take, even.
Yeah. The negatives in your life burst your bubble. Yun eh. I mean, they burst your bubble eh. Especially in those moments where you feel too self-assured. And especially when you feel that your pride's really taking over your life. Sometimes it takes tragedy to kind of bring you out of that. I'm not saying that all tragedy does that. I mean, there's certainly tragedy that's senseless. There's certainly tragedy that's that cannot be helped, like a death in the family. But you see, no matter whether it's there to burst your bubble or whether it's there to give you a bigger picture of life, okay, that it's not all rainbows and butterflies. That's what the negatives do to you. That they humble you. They open you to learn more because it's easier to learn when you're not in control of things.
When everything you thought you knew was just shattered, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I mean, it doesn't have to be something that is a result of your bad choices. I mean, even things like a death in the family. And it now, like for example, I mean, it hasn't happened to me, and but of course, I know it's going to happen eventually. But if let's say when both my parents die, right? I mean, now I have to realize that okay, now I have to do something to make sure that the family is intact. Now, I mean, I have to my understanding of responsibility and bringing people together is now on a very different level. Because again, that's what the negatives do to you.
Well, that was a lot.
Jeff, are you okay? Are you still okay?
I'm a little worried now. Na parang, why are there these long pauses after I talk? It's crazy.
The next question I just want to ask you at this point, no, it's something that we ask a lot of our guests. We ask our guests this question all the time, and if there's one thing that the listeners have to hear that isn't said enough, what do you think that is?
Wow.
And now you have the long pause.
Because you're forcing me into like a Twitter like statement, right? Which is so hard to do, right?
Yeah. It's actually a difficult question, so it's okay to long pause.
Actually, I want to tweak the question up a bit just for this episode because we are all a little bit baffled or today.
Baffled. Wow, that's an interesting, like baffled, like what the hell is he talking about? Baffled?
Maybe what's something that you believe in that other people think is probably crazy or insane or different. So that one thing that you want to share.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's another way of looking at that question.
I don't know. To be honest with you. It's okay. Because I actually already had an answer a while ago. Before you asked the follow-up. And what I would have wanted to say was really care about other people. Now I know you're probably thinking, oh, but that's like a universally accepted maxim. You know, you'd be surprised how it's not. Like there are many, many people who are so deeply self-centered. Even myself, right? I mean, I do have my self-centered tendencies too. I mean, you see that, let's say, in a small scale way, when, for example, you have people in your life who you call toxic or problematic, right? They think that they're never wrong, and that in fact, if there's anything wrong in the world, it's because of other people, not them. So, but that's the small scale version of people who don't care. But there's a large scale version now. I mean, think of, for example, how tribal we've become in terms of our politics, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, mga DDS Dilawan or the Democrat Republican, di ba? Di ba?
Mhm.
Literally, like, if you look at the Facebook of one person who you don't agree with, it's like a completely different echo chamber. And whenever you would, di ba, when you look at somebody's Facebook and then they have a different view as yours, you're just saying that you're so stupid, right? Di ba? You're not educated. Yeah, di ba? With this all, no logic. See, that's the larger scale version of us not caring. So when I say care about people, it seems so self-evident. It's like a universally acceptable maxim. But trust me, these days it's not as acceptable as people think. They probably accept it mentally,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't really translate maybe in their emotions, maybe in their actions. So yeah, please care about people. There are so many people in the world who are not like you. And what makes you mature is when you love them. Diba?
Yeah. Okay, this is like getting real deep and profound. I don't know about you, Jeff, but like it's making me rethink my life.
Quite.
I wonder if I'm just probably some of you are thinking, man, where does this guy get this shit from? Is he just reading from like Deepak Chopra quotes or something? Or something like that? The Dalai Lama, whatever booklet. Yeah, no, I mean, promise, I don't. I mean, I wish we had a camera to prove it to you. I don't have no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
but definitely agree. We have to care a little more. You know.
and care about people who you don't like, who are not like you.
Right.
Oh my god,
Right.
that okay, that is a great. That's
It's
actually
a
a,
big challenge,
yeah.
but yeah.
I'm beginning to realize now. I think that's exactly what Jesus meant very clearly when he says, "Love your enemies."
Hmm.
That's it. Love people who don't think like you, and care about people who would probably even spit in your face,
Yeah.
right? Because he even says further down in that same breath, right? He would say, "If you love your friends, how's that surprising?" Diba? Or if I
Hmm.
were to translate it in the context of everything we've been talking about, if you love your friends, how the hell will you grow up? If
Mm,
you only love the people who like you,
yeah.
then how will you mature? How will you have a more diverse understanding of the world around you? So
That's
That's
so
true.
true.
there.
And it's very, I think, applicable in this political climate because I just noticed it's very. You mentioned like the DDS Dalawan thing. It's very divided, and there's just so much logical fallacies. I can't even articulate and explain how it's not productive anymore, and it's because we refuse to see where they're coming from. Like I think it's very difficult now, like admittedly, yeah,
Absolutely.
but I think what you said is just very, very important. And it's actually a good way to end the show so like people can know how to apply this and should apply all this and everything that
Definitely.
you said because it's making me
Yeah.
rethink like a lot of things. And I'm going to come clean. When we talked about religion a while ago, I teared up. I
Oh my god, are
was
you
quiet
kidding?
for a while. I'm not
I'm
joking.
sorry.
No, 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 no. It's really good because I mean this episode is really good. Like I'm actually like thinking, rethinking so many things that I thought, okay, let's just leave it there. But yeah, this is very refreshing, like to have like new views or like views that I didn't want to hear, but you know, it's there, and I hope I really think it will help other people.
Right. Can I just sneak in one little thing?
Yeah,
Sure.
When I say love your enemies, or when I say love the people or care about the people who are not like you and all that, I'm not necessarily saying that you should then agree with what they say,
yeah,
Hmm.
right? Or try to convert them to your way of thinking, right?
Right.
It's something as simple as you not thinking that they're just a bunch of mindless robots anymore. But
yeah,
even if, let's say, I mean, their arguments are so out of whack and whatever, but in the end, when you actually see them face to face and you see that they have families, they have friends, they have concerns as well,
Hmm.
mhm,
it just humanizes them and makes you think that, you know, life isn't as black and white as I thought.
yeah,
So
Right.
I think when I mean by caring for somebody and loving your enemies, just remember that they're people too.
yeah,
Okay, they're people too.
Right. Seeing them not just probably just an adversary or someone you want to disagree with, but people with souls too. Other
Oh
souls
yeah,
as
for
well.
sure.
and I think with all this, I just want to ask, who do you want to give a shout out to anyone to those 16 joke lang. I'm not gonna
16 students, you want to shout them out?
No. No. It's probably not even an accurate number. It's probably not 15 or 16 or I don't know. And again, it was just a little, I don't know. Um, but I literally just want to give a shout out to all of my students who are listening to this, both current and former, those who I've ended up befriending, of course, and those who probably still have something like that. Really, I mean, the fact that you were my student, the fact that we learned together in the same context, I mean, you matter to me. You really do. And so I want to give a shout out to you and wherever you are. I mean, I hope that you're doing okay, you're doing fine. I also want to give a shout out to my colleagues from the theology department. I don't know if they're listening to this or they're going to listen to this, but I really just want to give a special shout out to them because they're such a supportive bunch of people, most especially given the uncertainty of online learning. They've been amazing. They've been amazing. Super.
That's fantastic. And really, Louis, thank you so much for the time. I think I'm sure Nina and I really enjoyed this conversation. We both learned a lot.
Yeah, I enjoyed
I enjoyed it too. Thank you.
And I'm sure everyone listening learned a lot too. This has been so
I
much
hope you're
fun.
right. I
it.
hope you're right.
Yeah, it's one of those nice moments where, you have that nice life conversation.
Yeah, this deep life conversation.
Let's have one over beer sometime soon, pag pwede na.
Oh yeah,
Oh my gosh,
definitely. For
soon,
sure.
please.
Okay, so again, thank you so much. This has been such an honor to have you on the show, and we really appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my honor too.
So that's all the time we have for today. We're your hosts. I'm Jeff,
And I'm Nina.
and this has been Hear 'em Out.